They laughed the moment she stepped onto the range with an eye patch, called her a pirate, said you needed 2 eyes just to see the target, let alone hit anything past 300 meters. She didn't snap, didn't speak, didn't fire back, not yet. Not until the SEAL commander stepped onto the range, unlocked a long black case, and handed her the Barrett .50. What happened next? Didn't just silence the jokes, it changed everything. Before we show you how a one-eyed veteran rewrote every rule they thought they understood, make sure you're subscribed with the bell icon turned on, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, and share this with anyone who's ever been mocked for something they couldn't hide. The morning air tasted like diesel and dust, the kind that sticks to your teeth and reminds you this isn't home. Sergeant Mara Keegan stepped off the transport van at 0530, boots hitting cracked asphalt that already radiated heat despite the early hour. The advanced marksmanship training facility stretched before her like a moon base dropped in the middle of nowhere, steel targets glinting in the distance, concrete barriers arranged like a maze, and the kind of silence that only comes with serious business. She looked exactly like what Central Casting would order if they needed someone to play unremarkable soldier. Standard tan fatigues with sleeves rolled neat, boots polished down to the laces, brown hair braided tight under her cap. What caught your attention, if you bothered to look, was the black eye patch over her left eye. Not medical white, not camouflage to blend in, just matte black, worn without apology or explanation. The admin clerk barely glanced up when she approached his folding table. Name? Keegan, Mara, Sergeant, Advanced Marksmanship Rotation. He ran a chewed pencil down his roster, found her name, made a check mark. Range safety brief is mandatory. Weapons issue at 0800. Don't be late. This isn't basic training anymore. Mara took the clipboard, signed where he pointed, and handed it back without comment. Around her, other candidates were already clustering in the shade of the equipment shed, adjusting plate carriers and comparing optics like kids showing off new toys. Someone had a phone out, filming himself with the range in the background. She walked past all of it to the far end of the line, back to the wall, clear view of the whole area, close enough to the emergency exit that muscle memory could get her there in the dark. Old habits from places where the wrong corner could get you killed. At evening chow, she sat alone near the windows, not antisocial, just separate. Her tray was organized with military precision, everything in its designated spot, fork positioned for quick access, napkin folded and placed where it wouldn't interfere with movement. Her eye constantly scanned the room without seeming to move. 3 tables over, Staff Sergeant Rodriguez held court with the easy confidence of someone who'd never been truly tested. Fresh from instructor school, uniform still creased from the package, talking loud enough for everyone to appreciate his expertise. The guys nodding along were cut from similar cloth. Jenkins, built like he benched motorcycles for fun. Morrison, sharp-eyed with the kind of smirk that never quite went away. Torres, nervous energy, wrapped in regulation camouflage. Some people get here because they earned it, Rodriguez was saying, just loud enough for half the mess hall to hear. Others get here because someone feels sorry for them. Mara walked past their table, carrying her empty tray. The conversation died just long enough for her to feel the weight of their stares, then picked up again with the kind of laughter that had sharp edges. She dumped her tray, wiped it clean, and headed for the door, but she filed their faces away. In the part of her brain that kept track of potential problems, same way you memorize terrain before moving through it at night, the rifle qualification range stretched out under a sky the color of old brass. Should have been routine shooting for anyone with Mara's record, which, according to her personnel file, included multiple combat deployments and marksman ratings that put her in the top 5% of the Army. Mara stepped up to the firing line, checked her M4, and locked in a magazine. The range commands echoed down the line in that familiar cadence every soldier knew by heart. Shooters, you have 20 rounds, 10 targets, 5 minutes. Watch your lane discipline and mind your backdrop. Rifles came up in unison. Bolts slapped home. Safety selectors clicked to fire. Commence firing. The line erupted in controlled chaos. 15 soldiers putting rounds downrange as fast as accuracy allowed. Brass arced through the air catching sunlight. Targets jerked and swayed under impact. Range safety officers moved behind the shooting positions with clipboards and stopwatches. Except at Mara's lane. She raised her rifle smooth as silk, sight picture perfect, breathing controlled. For a heartbeat, it looked like she was about to engage, and then she lowered the weapon. Her finger never approached the trigger. She stood there staring downrange with the expression of someone listening to music only she could hear. When the ceasefire whistle blew 2 minutes later, her target was untouched. Pristine, not a single hole in paper that looked like it had been hanging there since the Clinton administration. The range instructor walked over, jaw tight enough to crack teeth. "Keegan, you planning to shoot today, or are you just here for the scenery?" "Shooting, Sergeant," she replied, calm, matter of fact. "Then put rounds on target. That's what we're here for." "Roger, Sergeant." Second string, same result. Rifle up, perfect form, weapon lowered without firing. The instructor's pen carved angry marks across his clipboard, while 14 other soldiers chewed through ammunition like it was free samples at a gun show. By the time the range went cold, whispers were already spreading down the line like smoke. Mara walked off with the same unhurried stride she'd used walking on, ignoring the stares that followed her to the equipment turn-in. Behind her, Rodriguez's voice carried just far enough. "Guess some people's records don't transfer. Wonder what else is padded." The combat movement course was where confident soldiers discovered they weren't as tactical as they thought. Low crawls through sand that found every gap in your uniform, fire and movement drills that left grown men gasping like fish, and stress chutes designed to separate the wheat from the chaff. Mara's squad lined up at the starting point, sweat already darkening their uniforms despite the early morning hour. The course sergeant briefed them with the enthusiasm of a man who'd watched thousands of soldiers learn exactly how much their gear could hate them. 12 obstacles, movement under fire, targets of opportunity. Anyone who can't keep up with the pace runs it again this afternoon in full battle rattle. Questions? Nobody was stupid enough to ask questions. The whistle blew. Soldiers scattered toward the first position like someone had kicked an anthill. Mara started at the same measured pace she used for everything else. Not fast, not slow, just deliberate. She reached the first firing position third in line, waited her turn, then approached the barricade. Jenkins muscled his way through with a grunt and a curse, putting rounds downrange with more enthusiasm than accuracy. Morrison followed with the fluid motion of someone who'd been doing this since he was 12. Mara walked up to the position, studied the target array for exactly 5 seconds, then sat down cross-legged behind the barrier. She closed her eyes. "Keegan!" Jenkins shouted from the next position. "What the hell are you doing?" She didn't answer, didn't move, just sat there breathing steadily while her squad mates stared in disbelief. "Move your ass!" Morrison barked. "We've got a time hack!" The stopwatch kept ticking. Other squads flowed around them, soldiers grunting and cursing their way through the course. Mara sat motionless, hands resting lightly on her knees, looking for all the world like she was meditating in the middle of a Zen garden instead of a combat training exercise. When her squad came back around the final bend 20 minutes later, uniforms soaked with sweat and grit, she stood up, dusted off her pants, and jogged over to rejoin them. She slotted back into formation without a word, as if sitting in the dirt for 20 minutes was the most natural thing in the world. Rodriguez ripped his helmet off, face red with exertion and fury. "Outstanding! Just outstanding! Hope the enemy waits while you take a power nap." A few nervous chuckles rippled through the group. Mara kept walking, eye forward, expression unchanged. "Maybe she's conserving energy for something important," Torres offered weakly, though he didn't sound like he believed it himself. "Yeah," Jenkins said, spitting dust. "Like the ride home." Urban combat simulation was where training got real. 2-story plywood buildings arranged like a neighborhood straight out of Iraq, complete with narrow alleys, blind corners, and more places to get shot than you could clear in a lifetime. It was as close to actual combat as you could get, without people trying to kill you for real. Mara's squad assembled outside Building Alpha. weapons loaded with simunition rounds that hurt like hell but wouldn't put you in the hospital. The instructor briefed them with the clipped efficiency of someone who'd run this scenario until it was burned into his brain. Hostage rescue. Unknown number of role players, mix of hostile and civilian. Watch your backdrop, watch your targets, and finish it clean. Clock starts when that door opens. Rodriguez checked his weapon one final time, adrenaline already sharpening his movements. Jenkins, you've got the ram. Torres, tight on my 6. Morrison, watch the windows. Keegan. He paused, looking at her like she was a piece of equipment he wasn't sure worked. Try to keep up. Mara nodded once. No argument, no objection, just acknowledgement. The ram hit the door with a crack that echoed off plywood walls. Splinters flew, hinges screamed, and Rodriguez rushed through the breach with his rifle at the ready. Go, go, go. Jenkins followed, then Torres, then Morrison, boots hammering on plywood floors as they flowed into the building. Mara entered last, weapon ready, eye tracking corners and shadows. And then she peeled off into a corner of the first room, sat down against the wall, and closed her eyes. The simulation unfolded exactly as predictably as you'd expect. A role player in civilian clothes popped up from behind an overturned table, blue-tipped training rounds snapping through the air. Rodriguez caught one in the chest before he could adjust his aim, alarm buzzer marking him as a casualty. Contact front, man down! Torres tried to engage but froze when a second role player appeared in a doorway, catching him with a paint round to the shoulder. Another alarm, another casualty. Jenkins fought like a man possessed. But the role players had the angles and the initiative. A third contact from an upstairs window put him down hard. Paint splattered across his helmet and vest like abstract art. In 90 seconds, 3/4 of the squad was combat ineffective, and Mara Keegan sat in her corner, eye closed, breathing steadily, like she was taking a catnap while her teammates bled synthetic blood on the plywood floor. The exercise alarm wailed. Red lights flashed. Game over. Rodriguez ripped his helmet off, face mottled with fury and humiliation. He stormed across the room to where Mara sat, finger jabbing the air between them. You didn't fire a single round. You just sat there while we got massacred. What the hell is wrong with you? Mara opened her eye and stood, brushing sawdust from her uniform. Maintained rear security, she said calmly. Maintained. Rodriguez's voice cracked into a laugh without humor. We're all dead, Sergeant. Every single one of us. What universe is that maintaining anything? The instructor stepped between them before things escalated further, but his expression was no less grim than Rodriguez's. Keegan, this is your official warning. Show improvement by tomorrow's exercise or you're done. Pack your bags, done. Roger, Sergeant, she replied. No defensiveness, no argument, just the same unruffled calm she'd shown since day one. But something flickered in her eye. Not defiance, not anger, just a spark of something that hadn't been there before. Like someone had switched on a light in a room that had been dark for a very long time. By evening chow, the nicknames had solidified like concrete. Deadeye followed Mara through the chow line, whispered just loud enough for her to hear. Half-sight got tossed around whenever she appeared in formation. The 4 soldiers who'd tried to carry her through training had made it their personal mission to remind everyone, especially her, that she didn't belong. Hey, Deadeye! Rodriguez called out as she passed their table with her tray. Planning another meditation session tomorrow, or are you going to try staying conscious this time? Torres snickered into his mashed potatoes. Maybe she needs a seeing eye dog, something to wake her up when there's actual shooting. Morrison smirked over his coffee cup. Or a discharge. Either way, problem solved. Jenkins just shook his head, with the disgust of a professional soldier watching someone make a mockery of everything he believed in. She's going to get someone killed out there, mark my words. Mara walked to the far end of the dining hall, sat alone, and ate methodically. Same bite size, same pace, same careful attention to her surroundings that she brought to everything else. When she finished, she stood, bussed her tray, and walked out without a glance at the table behind her. But Chief Warrant Officer Mason was watching. Had been watching since the first day. And what he saw didn't match what everyone else was seeing. Most people looked at Mara Keegan and saw someone who didn't care, someone who'd given up, someone who probably shouldn't be carrying a weapon. Mason saw someone whose gear was arranged with a precision that spoke of years spent where disorganization meant death. Someone who moved through the base like she'd memorized every corner, every exit, every potential threat vector. Someone whose hands, when she thought no one was looking, ran through weapons manipulations with a fluidity that contradicted every fumbled drill on the training ground. These weren't the habits of someone who'd quit. They were the reflexes of someone who'd learned to survive in very dangerous places. The question was whether Mara Keegan was broken or just switched off. The breaking point came during the final evaluation exercise. A full-scale urban assault simulation, multiple buildings, role players armed with everything from pistols to belt-fed machine guns. The kind of scenario that separated the real operators from the pretenders. Mara's squad lined up at the start point, weapons loaded, faces grim with the weight of everything, riding on the next 45 minutes. One more failure and she was gone. Everyone knew it, including her. The exercise controller laid out the scenario with military brevity. Building-to-building clearance, unknown number of hostiles, civilian role players scattered throughout. Points for speed, accuracy, and casualty prevention. Failures will be noted and acted upon. His eyes found Mara in the formation. No words necessary. This was her last chance. Rodriguez adjusted his helmet, jaw set with determination. All right, people, let's do this right. Jenkins, you've got point. Torres, watch the corners. Morrison, cover our six. Keegan... He paused, looking at her with something between pity and disgust. Try not to fall asleep. The whistle blew. Jenkins charged the first door, ram swinging like a sledgehammer. Wood exploded. Hinges screamed, and the squad poured into the breach. Mara entered last, as always, weapon ready, but already drifting toward the shadows. She found a corner in the first room, lowered herself against the wall, and closed her eye. Same as always. Same as every exercise for 3 weeks straight. The squad flowed deeper into the building, leaving her behind like furniture they'd forgotten to move. Within minutes, the familiar sounds echoed through the plywood walls. Shouts, simulated gunfire, alarms marking casualties. From the observation tower, Chief Mason watched through his binoculars with growing frustration. 3 weeks of this pattern, and he was starting to wonder if Mara Keegan was beyond salvaging. And then everything changed. The black Suburban appeared without warning, engine purring through the main gate like it belonged there. Government plates, tinted windows, the kind of vehicle that made people stop what they were doing and pay attention without being told why. Commander Jake Rourke stepped out of the passenger side, and the entire training yard went quiet. Late 40s, weathered in the way that spoke of years spent in hard places doing difficult things. His uniform was crisp but functional, no ribbons for show, just the essentials and a sealed trident that caught the morning light. But it was the way he moved that caught everyone's attention. Deliberate, economical, like someone who'd learned that wasted motion could get you killed. He walked straight to where Mason stood watching the exercise, boots crunching on gravel with military precision. Chief Mason, Rourke said, voice carrying without effort. I'm Commander Rourke. I understand you have Sergeant Mara Keegan in this rotation. Mason straightened slightly. Yes, sir. She's in the middle of an evaluation right now. I know. Rourke's eyes found the building where Mara's squad was still fighting their way through role players. I'd like to observe. Sir, she's scheduled for dismissal. Her performance has been... I've read the reports. Rourke cut him off gently but firmly. I'm not here to challenge your assessment, Chief. I just want to see her run one more scenario. Mason studied the commander's face, looking for clues about what this was really about. What kind of scenario are we talking about, sir? Rourke's mouth ticked into what might have been a smile. The kind where she gets permission to wake up. Inside Building Alpha, the simulation was falling apart with predictable efficiency. Rodriguez had taken a paint round to the helmet and was marked as a casualty. Torres was down with a chest wound. Jenkins was fighting hard but losing ground to role players who knew every angle in the building. And Mara Keegan sat in her corner, eye closed, breathing steadily, oblivious to the chaos surrounding her. That's when Rourke's voice cut across the training yard like a blade through silk. "Keegan!" The single word carried through the plywood walls, through the noise of simulated combat, through 3 weeks of conditioning that had kept Mara locked in sleep mode. She opened her eye. "Keegan! Red Sky Actual, weapons free, execute!" The transformation was immediate and absolute. Mara rose in one fluid motion, rifle snapping to her shoulder, muscle memory taking over like someone had thrown a switch. The lethargy was gone, replaced by something fierce and focused and utterly professional. She flowed out of the corner like water finding its level, weapon tracking to angles that hadn't even developed yet. When the first role player appeared in a doorway, she was already engaging, controlled pair, center mass, target down, before he could bring his weapon to bear. Rodriguez, still sprawled on the floor with his fatal head wound, could only stare as Mara moved past him with surgical precision. This wasn't the same person who'd been sleeping through exercises for 3 weeks. This was someone else entirely. She cleared the first floor in 2 minutes flat, transitioning from room to room with the kind of tactical movement that gets taught at very expensive schools to very dangerous people. Every angle anticipated, every threat neutralized before it could develop, every movement designed to conserve energy and maximize efficiency. Upstairs, the role players were waiting with the kind of complex ambush that usually shredded even experienced squads. Mara flowed into it like she'd designed the scenario herself. 2 contacts from flanking positions. She dropped both with precise shots before they could coordinate fire. A third from a concealed position that should have been impossible to spot. She put him down while transitioning between the other 2. In the observation tower, instructors stopped taking notes to watch. Stopwatches hung forgotten in suddenly slack hands. This wasn't just good shooting or tactics. This was artistry. When Mara reached the final room, the hostage scenario that had been stumping squads all month, she didn't pause at the threshold to assess the situation. She read the geometry in a glance, calculated angles and backdrop, and moved. The role players holding the civilian hostage never had a chance. 2 shots, both targets down, hostage secured before anyone else in the building had even processed what was happening. The exercise alarm sounded, but this time it was the long, clean tone that meant mission accomplished. Mara safed her weapon, helped the hostage to his feet, and signaled all clear to the observation post. Her breathing was steady, controlled. Whatever had just awakened in her was already tucking itself back behind a professional mask. In the staging area, her squad mates stared in stunned silence. Rodriguez pulled his helmet off, paint still dripping from the impact site on his forehead, eyes wide with something that looked more like fear than respect. "What the hell was that?" he demanded, voice cracking. "How did you... Who are you?" Mara checked her weapon, made sure it was safe, and looked at him for the first time in 3 weeks. Really looked at him. "Same person I've always been," she said quietly. "You just never had clearance to see it." The debrief room was small and windowless, smelling faintly of gun oil and the kind of disinfectant they used in places where people discussed things that never made it into official reports. Mara sat on one side of a folding table, weapon disassembled for cleaning. Across from her, Commander Rourke and Chief Mason tried to make sense of what they'd just witnessed. "Red Sky Protocol," Rourke said without preamble. "Classified program, need-to-know basis, small teams, deep insertion, high-value elimination in denied areas." Mason leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. And Sergeant Keegan was part of this? She was the best part of it. Rourke's voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. 22 months operating in places that don't officially exist, doing things that never officially happened. Perfect mission record, 0 friendly casualties, 100% extraction rate. Mason looked at Mara, who was running a cleaning patch through her barrel with the same methodical precision she applied to everything. "So what happened? Why the transfer to regular training?" Mara's hands paused for just a moment. "Medical rotation. Took shrapnel on the last mission. Spent 8 months in recovery while the brass decided if I was still fit for the program. Red Sky operatives are conditioned to compartmentalize. Rourke explained, they learn to suppress their combat responses until they receive proper authorization. It's a safety measure, keeps them from going operational during routine activities. Authorization. Mason repeated slowly. Like what you said on the course. Exactly. Without the proper activation phrase, Red Sky operatives function like any other soldier. With it, he gestured toward the window, where Mara's course record was already being analyzed by instructors who couldn't quite believe what they'd seen. They become what they were trained to be. Mason was quiet for a long moment. So, for 3 weeks, she was essentially, what, playing dumb? Not playing, Mara said quietly. Contained. The conditioning isn't something you can turn off like a light switch. It's more like keeping a loaded weapon on safe. It's still loaded, but it won't fire until someone flips the selector. Rourke nodded. Command wanted to see if she could integrate into conventional units after her injury. They thought maybe the conditioning had been compromised, that she'd lost the ability to operate at that level. And had she? You saw what happened out there, Chief. Does that look compromised to you? Mason rubbed his face, processing the implications. And now? Now she gets assigned where her skills can be properly utilized, Rourke said. Advanced Training Command Special Operations Cadre. Not as a student, as an instructor. Mara finished reassembling her rifle, each piece clicking into place with practiced precision. Wherever you need me, she said, but not as a demonstration. No demonstrations, Rourke agreed. Just a professional doing professional work for people who understand what that means. The paperwork was processed within hours. Dismissal recommendation deleted, replaced with a transfer order that would take Mara Keegan somewhere her particular set of skills would be appreciated rather than misunderstood. But the story didn't end with paperwork. That evening in the barracks, the atmosphere was different. Not hostile anymore, but not comfortable either. The kind of tension that comes when people realize they've been sharing space with someone far more dangerous than they'd imagined. Rodriguez approached her bunk as she was packing, helmet in his hands like a peace offering he wasn't sure how to present. Keegan, look, we didn't know about what you could do. Mara glanced up from her duffel bag. You weren't supposed to. But why didn't you just show them earlier? Save yourself all the grief? Her answer was simple and devastating. Because I wasn't authorized to. Jenkins and Morrison kept their distance, speaking to her only when military courtesy demanded it. But Mason noticed they'd started studying combat footage differently, trying to understand how someone could move through space with such absolute confidence. Torres tried to apologize one evening, catching her outside the mess hall. I shouldn't have called you Deadeye. I didn't understand. Most people don't, Mara said. That's kind of the point. Commander Rourke left the next morning. Black Suburban disappearing through the gate like it had never been there. No ceremony, no speeches, just the quiet professionalism of people who understood that some stories were meant to stay classified. But before he departed, he pulled Mason aside for a final conversation. She'll probably request assignment to Training Command, he said. Teaching instead of doing. Don't try to talk her out of it. Why not? If she's as good as you say? Because people like her have already given enough. They've spent years in places most of us can't imagine, doing things most of us couldn't handle. At some point, they earn the right to pass on what they know instead of using it. Mason watched the Suburban disappear into the morning heat, carrying with it the only person who really understood what Mara Keegan had been through, what she'd sacrificed, what she'd become. The rest of the training cycle continued without incident. Mara completed her remaining evaluations with quiet competence, not the explosive demonstration she'd given during the Red Sky activation, but solid professional performance that reminded everyone she belonged exactly where she was. On graduation day, she stood in formation with the rest of her class, no different from any other soldier receiving orders and moving on to the next assignment. But those who'd been there, who'd seen what happened when someone gave her permission to be dangerous, carried that knowledge with them. Some secrets were too important to forget, even when they were too classified to share. And in the quiet moments afterward, when the official reports were filed and the classified details locked away, one question remained. How many other sleepers were out there, moving through the world with capabilities that only a few people knew existed? How many quiet professionals waiting patiently for someone with the right clearance to remind them what they were really for? The answer, like Mara Keegan herself, remained classified. Have you ever met someone who seemed completely ordinary until the moment they revealed what they were really capable of? Do you think Mara's conditioning, requiring authorization before going fully operational, was necessary protection, or did it put her at unnecessary risk during those 3 weeks of apparent failure? And what would you have done if you'd been one of those soldiers who spent weeks mocking someone who turned out to be one of the most dangerous people you'd ever meet? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We read every one, and your insights help shape the stories we tell next. If this story reminded you that the most dangerous people are often the ones you'd never suspect, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about quiet warriors and hidden strength. Share this with anyone who's ever been underestimated and anyone who knows that sometimes the most impressive battles are the ones nobody else can see. More stories about heroes hiding in plain sight are waiting on your screen. Watch those next, and we'll see you tomorrow with another story that proves appearances can be deceiving. Until then, remember, the wolf doesn't announce itself to the sheep.